Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're so glad you're here. Today, we'll explore how personal and societal conditions shape our bodies over time. Most of us are here because we're on our own healing journey or we support others on theirs. And many of us have read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, by our founder, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. In it, we learn that body-based approaches are very effective for working through psychological trauma. Since trauma alters our nervous systems, including the nervous system in the healing process is critical. That's what somatic treatments do. Bessel van der Kolk emphasizes the importance of using a combination of therapies because no single approach is typically sufficient on its own. Exploring various therapies at different points in the healing process can be especially helpful. That's why the Trauma Research Foundation created this program, Integrate Mind Body Practice for Working Through Trauma, and why we are so passionate about bringing it to you. Our goal is to share a diverse range of body-based therapies with as many people as possible. We want to show you the options available so you can find the ones that are right for you, and we want you to have hope that there are treatments that can help. Another goal of Integrate is to give us the chance to not just talk about the approaches, but to embody them ourselves by practicing together. That's what we're going to do today, embody the work. And we hope you walk away with a tool you can use or share right away. If you're watching on YouTube or other social platforms, please help spread the word by subscribing to the TRF channel and sharing our posts. It tells the platforms that this content is valuable, and then they'll show it to more people. I'm Mary Frangi. I produce this program, and I'm joined by my colleagues Connor McCann and Liz Coda working behind the scenes. Today, we'll practice trauma-informed presence and disable the chat during certain portions of the session. This supports connecting to ourselves by minimizing distractions and impulsive reactions. We'll also have time towards the end of the session for a Q&A. We are thrilled to have Prentis Hemphill with us, presenting Reinhabiting Our Bodies, Finding Center and Holding Contradictions, which explores how personal and societal conditions shape our bodies over time. Through guided practices, we will reconnect with our physical selves, sensations, and presence while embracing contradictions and staying connected to our center. Prentis is an embodiment facilitator, organizer, founder of the Embodiment Institute, and author of the best-selling book, What It Takes to Heal, which I've read and love. For over 10 years, Prentis has been working with individuals and organizations during their most challenging moments of change, navigating leadership transitions, conflict, and realigning practices with values. All of this Prentis does through an embodied approach, ensuring that our intentions and ideas can be lived out and practiced in our lives and through our bodies. Prentis is unearthing the connections between healing, community accountability, and our most inspired visions for social transformation. Prentis, we are so grateful you're here. Please take it away.
Mary, thank you so much for such a lovely introduction. Thank you to the Trauma Research Foundation. It's really nice to be here with you again in a different form. And thank you to all the people on the back end that are holding it together, Connor and the rest of the team. And thank you to all of you who showed up today. It's so exciting to have so many people gathered in this space that we've created from so many places in the world. And I was just kind of sitting here watching all of you share where you were from and feeling this web of connection. There's people on other platforms that are joining us too, or watching this later, but we're creating a kind of web of connection through these mediums of technology that I just want us to feel into a little bit more. I think the more we feel into and acknowledge that we're not alone in these questions or these pursuits, the more resource we all can be by that. So I'm feeling really touched by how many folks are here and the energy that many of us are bringing to this space, and that we couldn't create it without you. You watching this now or later, you are creating this space and impacting this space. So thank you for that. I'm so excited to be with you. I think of myself in some ways as a little bit of a somatic troublemaker. I like to kind of live on the edges of this world of somatics and trouble some of the things that get taken for granted or not always paid attention to. So I hope that I can do that in a loving and exciting way today with you all. A little bit about me and kind of my approach. For those that are not familiar, I'm originally from Texas. I live in North Carolina in the United States. So I saw people from North Carolina especially. So shout out to those folks. But I really strongly identify with being a person from the South, from the Southern United States. That's a lot of what has shaped me. And even when I think about my somatic understanding and embodiment, a lot of my really early lessons actually come out of the culture of the South and the Blacks that I grew up in. And my research and my practice has kind of made meaning of some of those early elements of the culture that I grew up in. But I really, really, really value the role of culture of our communities and thinking about healing. I've been doing somatics formally for about 15 years, I think, maybe a little over now. And I've always done somatics in a social and political context, meaning that to me, it is impossible or nearly impossible to take the individual totally out of their context. And that even when we think about systems, a lot of us think about practitioners or therapists, we'll think about family systems, and there's a lot of shaping and impact that can come from our families of origin. We learn a lot, we embody a lot through that experience. But I also believe that we embody things that exist on the level of culture and society, social norms, that those can come to be embodied in us also. So we can pick up habits, ways of being. We can learn through modeling, through what we consume in media. We can learn ways of being, and we practice those over time. And we can end up embodying values that we may or may not believe in, or may or may not align with, or may have served one point in our lives, but don't serve this point in our lives. And so I'm always curious about the social and political context in which we learn to express ourselves. We learn to relate to our own emotions, feelings, sensations, etc. The context in which we do that is really, really important. So my somatic work has always been one that tried to incorporate understanding of social and political context and historical context too. I also, for that reason, I use the word somatics, but I often interchange it with the word embodiment. And the reason why I do that is because, well, one, because I told my mother for years that I did somatics work, and she always thought I did semantics work. I worked with words. It's not really, at least in the context that I'm in, it's not really a word that a lot of people kind of can kind of intuit what the meaning is. Maybe if I were in Greece and people had a little bit more understanding of the core soma, the body and its kind of wholeness, fullness, it might make more sense. But a lot of the contexts that I'm in don't really, can't intuit from that word what I mean. Also because, like I said earlier, I use the term embodiment because I feel so, so deeply inspired by the kind of canon of somatics that has really been cultivated in the last, I would say, 40-ish years. Maybe other folks have different timelines. There's been such a rich, so many rich insights that have come from the work of a lot of neuroscience, psychology, the understanding of our nervous systems. It's been incredible. And I think that they're, again, embedded in kind of cultures and the way that humans have organized themselves. There have been ways of understanding co-regulation, community level regulation, that I think it's important for us to value. And I think a lot of our most famous and brilliant somatic teachers, researchers also draw on some of those lineages and knowledges. I know that where I was trained drew on practices that came from thousands of years earlier. So I really believe in value in the human ingenuity that has created rituals around seasons changing, or rituals when a birth would happen or death would happen, or a collective practice of dance to ready ourselves for conflict with some other entity. That there are always practices that human beings have generated to sync up our nervous systems, to help us regulate or process grief, to move things through the body. And those, to me, really relate to a lot of the practices that we come up with in somatics these days. I think there's a lot we can draw from the historical practice too, and present day practice. A lot of those rituals and practices exist. I think sometimes about my blueprint for co-regulation, when I'm often looking for or longing for, feels like the hug that I used to get from my grandmother. That kind of nestling into somebody, that soft warmth, and what I was able to feel and steady in myself just by having that kind of comfort and connection with someone, love from someone. That is deeply co-regulating. So I really want us to value those really intimate and available, accessible resources that some of us have or have had in our lives as important for somatics, important for healing, important for regulation too. The other thing I want to say, we're going to move into practice in a bit, but I want to talk about kind of my application, where I do my work and why I do it there. And I, in Mary's intro, talked about how I do this work with organizations inside of social movements. It's, to me, trauma and oppression are really deeply related. That oppression is actually a concentration of trauma. And that's part of the function of it effectively, is that it's a collective trauma that gets imposed on certain bodies, communities, zip codes, whatever it might be, that's actually what oppression is. And when I think about how I want to apply what I'm learning about somatics or embodiment, I think about people that don't have the resources actually to address the traumas that they experience, and that may be ongoing, the traumas of poverty, that the traumas of deep lack or neglect, societal neglect. And so I try to apply my work in those places that often don't have access. I also find that, again, when we go back to what it is that we embody, that a lot of us can learn ways of being that actually don't align with how we want to be. And I tell this story often of growing up in a household where there was one person who could experience and emote anger, and it wasn't me. And because of that, it didn't mean that I stopped feeling angry. And I think that's a lot of what can happen. We can be in a scenario where it doesn't feel safe to express whatever it might be, but it doesn't mean that you don't feel that way. It means that you learn how to comport yourself in certain ways so as not to reveal that, which is deeply embodied learning. So you have an emotion arise, like I did. I would have the emotion of anger arise, and rather than express it, rather than say I was angry or do anything else that I might have seen modeled, I actually learned that to stay safe, I had to slack my face. I had to hold my breath. I had to tighten my chest so as not to reveal. I could get really small, pull myself back. And over time and through practice, that became the primary way that I responded to the feeling of anger that I had, not only in that scenario, but it became more generalized over time. And that's what can happen with many of us, is that we start to embody or practice, or we have to practice through the context that we're in, certain ways of being that over time get their own automaticity. They become so deeply habituated that we no longer can tell that we're doing it. And I no longer could even tell that I was angry. I lost my awareness of the anger because my body learned that, oh, that's unacceptable. We cover it up in this way. And so I lost contact with what the actual mechanism, what was actually happening, because I practiced it so often. And for leaders that I've worked with who've had big visions for the world or big visions for their communities, who wanted, people to feel like community, people that were trying to interrupt interpersonal violence or respond to the impacts of state violence or whatever it might be, they had these longings and a real clarity about what their community needed, and yet may have embodied certain ways of being that made that less possible. Because like, and this is not a blame or a bad, but a lot of us are steeped in ways of being that are actually counter to the deep longings that we have, that might be run counter to the things that we believe. If we grow up in a society that doesn't value certain people, we may want to almost intellectually work with that group of people, but what may be embodied is we don't actually know how to listen deeply. We don't know how to follow. These skills, these sort of relational skills that we develop and practice over time may not be embodied in us. And so it may interrupt our ability to live out the visions that we have. And so I really work with somatics on that level, or embodiment on that level, with leaders that have big visions and want to become more aware of what it is they embodied and become more aligned in what they embody and what they believe. Because that is the tricky thing about embodiment, is that sometimes we can think we're doing something and we're actually doing something else. And, you know, I tell a story years ago, when I first started doing embodiment and somatics, I would notice that the story I had, I was probably in my 20s when I started doing this work. I was definitely in my 20s when I started doing this work. And I had this story of, oh, I'm going to go meet people. I'm going to go out to a party and make new friends. I really had that longing and desire. And then I would go to social situations and I would leave and I'd be like, wow, I had no conversation with anybody. It must be because this, that, or the other thing is bad about me, and everybody knows it and everybody can see it. And as I started to do more and more embodiment work, I started to become more aware, not just of what I thought, but what my body was actually doing. And so I would notice, oh, if you go to a party, you end up standing next to the food, or you go into the bathroom, or you leave early, or all these ways that your body is actually doing something different than your deepest longing. You're not entering into conversation. You're not leading with your curiosity, because there's a lot of fear and terror there that I needed to work through. But as I became more aware of what I was actually doing versus what I was longing for, I was able to make certain shifts or to practice in certain ways with resource and support, different ways of being that actually align with what I long for. So that's what I'm most interested in with folks that I work with in my own journey, is how can I become more and more congruent, more and more here, more and more aligned. And rather than kind of moving to control, which is a lot of the ways that we get taught to be with our bodies, is that you locate an emotion or a sensation and you control it, you cover it up, you hide it. I'm actually interested in how do we widen, in a way, our ability to be with much more sensation, much more longing, be with the impulses that we have, be with the stories that we have in ways that don't automatically push us into reactivity, which I'll talk about a little bit more. So how do we actually have bodies that can hold the fullness of the life that we are, rather than clamping down, controlling, and being uncurious generally about how it is that we feel. And even sometimes with somatics, I get a little, it feels like hacks. We end up trying to hack ourselves into perfectly calm and regulated all the time. And that is not actually what I'm interested in. I'm interested in full aliveness that can be close to awareness, that gives us more choice. Awareness, aliveness, choice. That's what I'm talking about with embodiment. So we're going to do one practice to start, and then we're going to get into a little bit, another layer of work with contradiction. But I just want to do a quick centering practice here with us all. And partly what we're doing with this practice is like, where in your body have you vacated? Where have you left for whatever reason? What are you unfamiliar with? What's numb? What's tight? We want to just start practicing bringing our awareness to how we're actually living in our bodies, how life is moving through our bodies. You might notice where it flows easily, where it doesn't flow at all, but we want to bring a lot of curiosity. So I'm going to ask you to just really notice if your body is supported right now, where you are in space. Are you leaned over your center? Are you causing a strain on your body? Are you pulled way back, causing a strain? What's the simplest way, the most easeful way your body could find support in this moment? Maybe you need a pillow. Maybe you need a chair. Who knows? Good. And then I'm going to be speaking, but really, this is not, there's guidance here, but it's not formulaic. The most important thing in embodiment is your relationship with your own sensations. So if you need to tune me out, do that. But I want to invite you to bring parts of your attention that may be elsewhere back into your being. Maybe you're in the last meeting you had or dinner time where you are, to other people. See if you can start to collect those parts of yourself back into you. And just get a little curious. How is life moving here? Almost like a topography of you in the present. Where's tight? Where's slack? Where's hot? Where's cold? Not fixing, just allowing. And I want to invite your breath. I almost think about it in like the deepest part of my pelvis, my belly, that that part of me is actually inviting my breath to deepen. There's like an invitation there. Which taps me into that anchoring sensation that I have near my center of gravity. It's kind of always connected to the core of the earth. If you can sense that in your own body. And then we will center intentionally in a few directions. So I'm going to ask you just to get really curious about your lower body. On the seat, however you're positioned, how are you of this world, of the ground? You might have to feel through the building you're in, like I do, all the way down to the earth. Let yourself be called back to the earth. And then as you do that, start to feel through the texture of your muscles, of the fat in your legs or lower body or belly, your feet. Maybe opening your feet up if you can, the bottoms of your feet. And then letting yourself also simultaneously extend upwards. And this is a real breathful extension. Sometimes we can over effort and try to prove and do, and that's not sustainable. What we want to find is that if anything has shaped you into hiding, and you have to feel, do I have that kind of shrinking? Or do I have a posturing of proving that's kind of habitual? We want to find what's the length that is just honest. That is just here. That's just you. And feel that length, that verticality, however it's manifesting in your body. And see if you might invite the sense of there's an inherent dignity in who I am. There's a dignity to my story. There's a dignity to me, no more, no less than anyone else. Just let that be breathe through the system a little bit more. If there's something you need to make that come into your system, you can provide that support. And this isn't a scarcity dignity. We can have, each of us can have dignity at the same time, and it doesn't do anything to the other person. Good. And now we're going to feel side to side, just become more aware of the width of your body, maybe the width of your head, ear to ear, width of your neck, shoulder to shoulder, hip to hip. Just feel all the way down so you feel that the width of you. And let that fill out in the middle a bit more. Let yourself soften across your face, across your chest, across your belly. Our vital organs are here. It's right in the center, upright. So we can do a lot of contracting to kind of quietly hold that, protect that from each other. And you get to see how much do I need to protect right now? Can I actually let myself open here? And what does that softening do to my awareness? My sense of aliveness in my own body. Maybe there's fear, maybe there's joy. Without following it, we just give room. And here we talk about, this is where we might connect with others, might feel for each other, maybe the people and plants and animals around you. You can feel for them. And you can also feel for the people on this call whose faces you may never know, but there's life there. And there's life in you. Connection. How available are you for connection? It's a question. And then we're going to feel into depth. So back to front. So you might feel that back body, and we're not getting rid of anything else. We're just filling out more and more. Can you feel that back body? The part of your body that doesn't have a cell phone, doesn't scroll, back there hanging out, back of your head, neck, back, butt, thighs. Feel all of that. And this is where my practice, I bring ancestors to my back. I bring people who care about me to my back, whether I know them or not, that want me to be on the path that I'm on. And it helps me soften my back and open to almost a felt sensation of trust, of relaxation, of I'm not alone. Not even alone across time. And then feeling into the middle of your body, the density, the fleshiness, the processes, the brilliance of this design inside of there. And then feel your front body from the inside, front of your face, chest, all the way down your front body, knees, toes. I said something earlier about being over center. So we have so many sensory possibilities on the front of our body, and our cell phones, again, all of this can pull us forward, pull us into trying to get to the next moment. So see if you can actually feel this moment from the inside out without abandoning your back body. What if there's nowhere to rush to? What if there's nothing wrong? Can you let this moment unfold with your presence? And then lastly, feeling all of that, just noticing what your awareness is doing, maybe how your blood is pumping, what it feels like. I want to center lastly on this dimension of care so we can feel into our lower bellies. I want you to ask that place what you care about, what you really, really, really care about. When I talk about inhabiting other values, sometimes we have commitments that we're holding that are not ours, commitments that were imposed on us. What do you want to organize your life, your aliveness around? And see if you can draw that up or almost breathe that through. It could be simple. It could be like love. It could be family. It could be freedom. It could be whatever it is. Let that live a little bit more in your tissues. I always say so that's not a secret. So you're not like, I secretly care about this thing. See if you can practice living that thing a little bit more. Letting it come all the way to your fingertips, to your eyes, to your mouth, to your legs, and centering on it there. And then we're going to close this practice in a second, but I just want you to take a moment to notice what is for you right now, what mood you're in, what parts of your body maybe you're curious about. And then I'm going to invite you to, in the chat in a second, just offer 1 to 3 words about how you are right now. And I always say, just practice telling the truth, how you really feel. So once you feel like you can language what's here for you, please just add it into the chat. Thank you all so much. There's such a range of what we feel. I see some conflicted, relaxed, tingling, spacious, fidgety, grieving, connected, comfortable, unsupported, constricted, prickly, distant, anxious, sick, sleepy, tall with a connection, strength, sad, angry. And we just let that be. You know, part of the practice too is letting people be what they are. That's how this really works relationally too. What would the world be built like if we were all a little bit more honest with each other? Thank you all. And you can keep those coming for another 15 seconds or so. And I'm going to shift us into a little bit of practice on contradictions. I see resonance between people, which is really great too. We impact each other. You feel a way, I go, oof, what does that hit or touch on in me too? You know, we are always in relationship with each other. We want to let that be. So I want to talk a little bit about contradictions, and I feel like this is such a relevant topic for our time. And I think about contradictions and the holding and being with contradictions as so vital to really when our ability to process what it is that we feel, hold complexity. We're not really, I think, my opinion, I, I I'll say it this way. I always joke, I don't really like the feelings wheel. I do like the feelings wheel, but I don't love the feelings wheel. And why is because I think that there's such a range of emotions that I want to invite people into the remix of what they feel. Like I'm 10% cranky and 40% grateful. And, the blending of states, I think, is actually closer to what we feel. And I know that we need tools to help us get there in the first place. But I want us to keep kind of hungering for the most authentic understanding of what's happening inside of us. I think that that compartmentalization, even of how we understand our emotions, is part of the challenge. And what I'm excited about is like, what does it mean to live in our bodies in a way where multiple things can be true at once, and often are true at once? Um, we are oftentimes walking contradictions. There's paradoxes in us, in the world, inside of us all the time. And our inability to practice with that content, to allow it to be, I think actually keeps us often from, how do I say this? Like moving, allowing feeling and emotion to move through our systems. I think it keeps us from the information that's embedded in the contradictions, the knowledge, the wisdom. A lot of what I'm focusing on right now is like, how do we grow up? I'm sort of deeply worried that we're not, as a species, mature enough for the complexity of the challenges that we face. And I think part of growing up is being able to hold contradictions and, to be able to have the skill, the willingness, the connection with ourselves to be able to really process things on that level, on a really embodied level. We have to suspend a little bit our wanting to, have certainty. We have to suspend a little bit of that grasping for certainty at all times to actually, I think, achieve wisdom and insight and all of that. So I think a lot of our challenge around contradictions has to do with the reactivity in our bodies. And I know a lot of you probably have a lot of skill or insight around kind of stress responses and reactivity. So I won't go too deep into that. But I will say that the certainty that comes out of our reactivity or comes out of fear, the desire for certainty that comes out of fear, is because we want to split the world into certain binaries: good, bad, innocent, guilty, all of these ways of interpreting. That allows us to act. If we perceive a threat, if we perceive a conflict that might implicate us or that we're a part of, we want to split things into really, really neat binaries so that we can respond to it and lower our own stress hormones in our body to feel some relief. We want things to safely split out into good or bad. And I've said before in the work that I've done, especially around innocence and guilt and transformative justice, is that our desire for innocence and guilt are good and bad. It makes sense, but it can often obscure what actually happened, who's responsible, what we might do to repair, the kind of the moves that we might make. The nuance gets obscured by right, wrong, innocent, guilty, when actually I think the questions we might want to ask is like, what motivated this? Who holds the weight of this? How might they repair? There's a lot of different questions that we could get curious about. So, but our nervous systems, when we experience threat, it's like good, bad, because I need to get out of here. I need to decide. I can't spend time going, oh, how might I react to this? There's a story I tell that I won't get into here, but I stepped on a rattlesnake once and I ran, and my wife stood there staring at it. And I didn't think I'm going to leave her here, but my body just ran. That reactivity came out of me because my body couldn't go, well, how old is this rattlesnake? Maybe this isn't that big of a rattlesnake. No, your body wants to act quickly and get out of danger. So that's important to understand. And that's a lot of what we apply to our own inner conflict and contradictions, is that intolerance of nuance because we perceive threat. We live in a world where threat looks much different. I'm sure you all have thought about this and know this than it did for our ancestors. Our threat is less cut and dry. Sometimes it's deeply conceptual or ideological, the threat that we experience. And underneath these concepts or underneath these ideologies are all of these other moving parts that when we get stuck in binaries or reactivity, we can't understand how to move those parts or interpret them or make a different meaning of them. We lose access to all of that when we simply go good or bad. Nuance gets really impossible when we're afraid. And the other thing I want to say is like this exploration of contradictions is not to say everything is all nuance and nothing is, everything is everything. I actually think nuance and feeling allows us to make more precise moves. If I can actually see more of what's going on, I can make a more precise choice, and I can be more responsible for the choice that I'm making. I can go, I'm making this choice. It's not perfect, but from what I can see, this makes the most sense. So I want to do a little bit of practice with you all just about holding contradictions in your own life. And we're going to do a couple rounds. And the first one is really just like getting more familiar with how a contradiction might be living inside of you. And I do this with people all the time. And I think another way to think about contradiction is like an inner conflict. And a conflict to me is like a seemingly oppositional impulses, ideas that are happening. The meeting point of seemingly oppositional ideas, motives, needs is conflict. And the inner conflict and seemingly oppositional, because a lot of it there's a perception piece. But finding that conflict, like, I love my mother, but I don't want to call her, whatever it might be that you feel inside of you. We want to just get familiar. Now we're going to work with some content, and I want you to work on a scale of 1 to 10, something that's a 4.5. We're not trying to leave here under-resourced or, blown out in any way. So we want to find something that's like, it's agitating enough that it elicits a response, but you can stay with it with awareness. So I want you just right now first to imagine a conflict. Maybe it's something happening in your home or work. Maybe it's something with a client that feels intractable. And as you're finding it, just notice what happens in your body. Like, how do you know that there's a conflict there? What's happening at the level of sensation? And don't try to be perfect with it. Don't try to be calm, centered. Just notice maybe there's irritation arising. How does irritation arise in your body? I can feel my face tightening and my own sense of like, I'm gonna let me do it is the phrase that keeps coming to me. Might be something different for you. What's your approach to this conflict? What's tightening? What's loosening? Maybe you're distracted. Maybe some combination. And just notice. And then I want to, we're going to shift a little bit in the practice. Once we have a handle on the thing and there's some sensation related to it, and actually practice giving this conflict, this contradiction, some space. So if you can identify, are there poles or what is the opposition that's inside of you? What are the sides of it? And take one of your hands, it can be your right hand, and really let one pole, one side, give it room in your hand. Let it make its case. What is it telling you about what you value, about what you long for? Maybe it's telling you something about patterns in yourself or people around you. In your hand, let it have all the energy. If it's angsty, if it's contracted. And then we'll take the other hand and see if you can just bring some attention there and let it hold the other pole, the other position, the other set of needs, the other values, and let them fill out. What motivates this? What is it trying to take care of? What's beautiful in this? What's old habits? Let it talk to you. And then when you're ready, we want to sort of take both and really let them live in between your hands. And you can play with like how much you can hear the voices, the perspectives at the same time. You might want to if you can tolerate it, bring them close together. If you can, if they need more space, give them more space. But as they speak, bring that centered body to them. What if, at least in this moment, there's nothing to fix? Maybe listen to one voice and then listen to the other. Keep dropping them into your center. Keep dropping your breath into your center. You might notice that they're already starting to change a little bit, but don't rush that. That doesn't even need to happen. Just make room for both to be true, or at least real. And see if you can keep widening and coming more into connection with the rest of your body. See if there's room for them to both be true and in conversation. And as we close and kind of let that fall away, maybe I can still feel a little churning in my own lower belly. But I'm going to tell it, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to keep breathing into you and bring space here. And I'm going to listen. And I already feel their voices changing a little bit. Just acknowledge them, acknowledge that space, acknowledge your connection and your non-abandonment of that. And we'll close this practice. And I'd love to just hear in a moment if anything showed up for you or popped up for you in that exploration around inner conflict, contradictions, spaciousness in your own body. Read out. Some folks said, gained perspective, both can live together, conflict, self-acceptance, softening, cooperation, a really hot left hand, pride that allowed both to exist, just allowing, conflict, anxious, resistance, awareness, the urge to want to problem solve. Absolutely. Some found resolution, some found agitation, softening of the tension. Left holds on too tight, right needs nurturing, knowing. Thank you all for those insights. All of it perfectly done. All of it perfect. I'm going to give it over to Mary in a second, but one of the things I just want to leave you with is that I really believe embodiment requires us to be able to live a certain kind of non-duality, or at least a suspension in certainty, control, that allows us to get to know ourselves, allows us to express ourselves authentically. And these are the kinds of ways we can give room to and acknowledge the conflicts, the contradictions that live in us without having to judge, control, make bad, make ourselves bad. We just are. That's how we grow. It's part of what compels us into growth, into action, into learning are these contradictions that really live inside of us. So I hope this is an invitation to be with your own body and life in a way that gives room for that. So thank you all so much. I'm loving your responses, and I'll pass it over to Mary for a little Q&A.
Prentis, thank you. The comments in the chat, people are having epiphanies, and I know myself, I gained a new perspective on the conflict I thought about, and this has been really wonderful. We have a few questions in the Q&A, and I want to go to Rebecca's question. She asks this question, and then several people upvoted it. So she's wondering if there are specific considerations when it comes to somatic practices for people who've suffered SA or sexual assault. I'd love to know if there are any considerations and maybe if there are specific exercises to try with these folks.
Absolutely. There's so much actually to say about that. I'm trying to think like what might be something I could connect you to that would even explore this more deeply. I would say for a lot of people who, well, I started this work, I actually started doing somatics, working around issues of childhood sexual abuse, CSA. That was my introduction to somatic practice. And what I learned from that was one, and I learned this through my own therapeutic practice, the incredible prevalence of CSA in particular and SA in the world. I say to people often, most of the clients that I've ever worked with have experienced some either CSA. I would say most have experienced CSA, and a higher number of that have experienced SA. So I think it's important for us to understand that this is not, some small subset of community, but we talked about it where I used to work at a place called Generation 5 that was worked around CSA, that it's its own epidemic. It's its own silent epidemic. We don't know even how much it is happening, and it is one of the first ways that people come to be separated and terrified from the sensations in their bodies. And I always think about our awareness of our bodies comes on in waves, that we are a body, that we have body, it comes on in waves. And CSA, for example, is one, it brings people into a kind of acute awareness of a body, but it shapes deeply how they think about what their body is and how they relate to their own sensations in their bodies. So somatic work is, I think, deeply necessary for survivors and can be deeply um, challenging for survivors in different ways. And I would say survivorship looks different for different people, but it can be very evocative to revisit, not just through memory, but through felt sensation, both how one came to be empowered or disempowered in their own body, what's possible or not possible. I work with one of the things I do, especially with survivors, is I do a boundary practice first whenever we start working with each other, so that there is a no that is possible between us. And so we do a kind of physicalization of boundaries. And I really suggest something like that whenever you work with survivors. So we practice yes, no's, maybes, and physically, no. And I find just that simple consent practice, just a simple so-called simple physicalization is so evocative and deeply important for survivors to feel that they can shape the space, the somatic space, the therapeutic space, that they're they can shape it back, that they can impact, that they can stop or invite or whatever it might be. It really reshapes the relational patterning that a lot of survivors can have. So I guess one thing I would say is like work slowly, intentionally. More is never better, but connection, awareness, slowly re-inviting perception, felt sense, listening closely to what emerges from the body, and working with consent in a real way so that people can perceive the choices that they have with you, is deeply repatterning. There's a lot more that we could say, but I would say that's a really important part of working with survivors.
Thank you. There's so many questions, but maybe we have time for one more. Hamza is asking, and several people have upvoted, if trauma is localized in a specific part of the body, for instance, the cheek or the chest, what kinds of therapies are best for that versus what Bessel talks about in his book as therapy for the whole body?
Mm-hmm. Um, I'll just say, there's different ways that we say our bodies hold, but really our brains are sending signals to certain parts. Like you wake up in the morning, and if there's something unresolved, if there's a trauma that is unresolved, unprocessed, has not had room, you're going to wake up every day. I mean, Bessel does talk about this, that sometimes we can orient towards the trauma as either trying to perpetually resolve it through our interactions with people or trying to avoid it. And that's how it shows up in the relational space. But in the body, it'll show up as certain kinds of contractions or certain kinds of holding or certain kinds of moods or certain kinds of behaviors, etc. So what I work with is a lot of times I can show up as a contraction, or can show up as almost like a slackness, like a unwillingness to inhabit that part of the body. So either the work can be bringing aliveness, pushing energy through. When I talk about that no, when I talk about that extension, like bringing aliveness to parts, or it can look like holding the contraction in some way, respecting the contraction, supporting even the contraction to happen, can be a deep relief to people. Oh, this wants to contract, let me help it contract. And then that can almost allow the body to let go in a different way. So there's different ways of working with different reactions to whatever the content is. So it really is varied depending on the body and the person.
Thank you. There's so many good questions. Can I ask this one quick question? Because I think a lot of people would be interested. How do you address distraction and fidgeting, whether it's associated with ADHD, but also in general? Because it can be so hard to stay with it. This is from Haley.
It can be so hard to stay with the movement or the whatever it is that you're.
Yeah, whatever the meditation you're trying to focus on, it can be so hard to stay with.
This is, again, I hate to be this way, but it really depends on what's happening. But I've worked with people to change even what they think focus is, or even what they think awareness is. To me, awareness is allowing aliveness to move through the body. And I want people to, I'm someone that had been diagnosed with ADHD. And when I understood that my own awareness is actually not, uh, I've got to show my attention in this way, but I actually get to feel things and move things through. And notice when something catches me and notice when something feels soothed by that, that when my body actually changes the way that I perform attention, and there's actually a wider range of um, sensation that is allowable in my own body, it changes. So I fidget, I move, I swallow, whatever. I allow aliveness to be, and I think that's really important for people to have spaces to do that. And fidgeting can have so many different meanings, but I really want us to change. We've become so mechanized in a way. I really want us to become more deeply human and allow aliveness to move the way aliveness wants to move.
Yeah, thank you, Prentice. Thank you to our audience. You've asked some great questions. I'm sorry we can't get to all of them. Prentice, this has been such a calming, enlightening, wonderful session. We're so appreciative of your time. Thanks for being here. Integrate strives to offer everyone a variety of body-based approaches so that you can start working with your trauma. If you'd like to find the replay of this session or more sessions, please visit the Trauma Research Foundation Somatic Library. We look forward to seeing everyone next time. Thank you. Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.